Star Trek just called out J.J. Abrams' reboot with a hilarious dig. In the vast cosmos of the Star Trek universe, where timelines and parallel realities often intertwine, there's always room for a good-natured jab, even across continuities. And in a recent episode of Star Trek, Lower Decks, the irreverent animated series beloved for its deep-cut references and meta-humor, fans got exactly that, a sharp, clever, and hilarious dig at J.J. Abrams' flashy Kelvin timeline reboot films. In true Trek fashion, the joke was layered with meaning, affection, and just the right amount of pointed commentary about lens flares, action over substance, and the ever-contentious topic of canon. While Lower Decks has never shied away from poking fun at its own franchise, this particular moment stood out as a moment of intertextual brilliance, one that didn't just crack a joke, but revealed something deeper about the ongoing dialogue within Star Trek itself. Here's why this dig at Abrams' Trek wasn't just funny, it was necessary, insightful, and part of what makes Star Trek thrive. The joke heard across the quadrant. The moment came in Season 4, during a scene where the crew of the USS Cerritos finds themselves in a simulation designed to replicate famous Starfleet battles. As the holodeck churns out familiar scenes, from Wolf 359 to the Battle of the Binary Stars, the program suddenly glitches and throws them into a scenario labeled Kelvin Timeline Crisis Protocol. Cue chaos. Everything gets saturated with blinding lens flares, dramatic music swells with bass-heavy action beats, and characters begin running from one explosion to another, even though they're on the bridge. At one point, Ensign Mariner quips, "Why is everything so shiny? And why am I suddenly emotionally compromised?" Tendi adds, "This simulation is over-directed." Boimler screams as the warp core inexplicably explodes behind him, twice. It's a blink and you'll miss it moment, but fans who followed Star Trek since its 2009 reboot knew exactly what was happening. And they laughed. Oh, they laughed hard. Lens flares and exploding bridges. The Abrams effect, J.J. Abrams' Star Trek films, Star Trek 2009, Into Darkness 2013, and Beyond 2016, were polarizing from the start. While they successfully revitalized the franchise for a new generation, they did so by borrowing heavily from the aesthetics and pacing of action blockbusters. Gone were the extended moral debates and quiet diplomacy of the next generation. In came epic space battles, rapid-fire dialogue, and yes, those infamous lens flares that could blind a bored cube. Abrams himself once admitted to overusing lens flares, explaining in interviews that he wanted everything to look more futuristic. Unfortunately, this stylistic choice quickly became meme-worthy. So when Lower Decks mocks the brightness and unnecessary chaos of the Kelvin timeline with flares, melodrama, and triple warp core breaches, it's a self-aware nod to a divisive chapter in Trek history. Meta humor done right. What makes this joke so brilliant isn't just the parody of Abrams' visuals, it's the way Lower Decks uses it to critique and celebrate at the same time. The show acknowledges that the Kelvin timeline exists within the larger Star Trek multiverse. It even implies that Starfleet officers in the Prime timeline are aware of it as a cautionary tale or exaggerated alternate reality. This moment of meta-humor shows Star Trek doing what it does best, reflecting on itself. Unlike other franchises that try to ignore controversial past entries, Star Trek embraces the debate, even weaponizing it for comedy. In doing so, Lower Decks transforms fan frustration into a bonding moment. It's a reminder that Star Trek is big enough to hold multitudes, even sparkly, loud, occasionally nonsensical ones. The emotionally compromised comment wasn't just a gag. Mariner's line, "Why am I suddenly emotionally compromised?" is more than a surface-level joke. It's a surgical strike at one of the biggest fan criticisms of the Kelvin timeline, the recharacterization of classic Trek heroes. Spock, in particular, was portrayed as a far more volatile figure than Leonard Nimoy's version. In Star Trek 2009, Spock nearly kills Kirk out of rage and must constantly wrestle with barely contained emotions, earning him the in-universe description of emotionally compromised. While Zachary Quinto delivered a strong performance, some longtime fans felt the reboot Spock leaned too far into dramatics, missing the subtle balance of logic and suppressed feeling that defined the original character. So when Mariner suddenly questions her emotional stability, Lower Decks is lovingly dragging this version of Spock and the reboots riding through the proverbial transporter coals. A celebration in disguise. Still, the joke doesn't feel mean-spirited. That's key. Lower Decks isn't mocking Abrams' work out of spite. It's doing it the way friends tease each other at a reunion. By recognizing the Kelvin timeline's quirks, the show acknowledges its place in Trek canon, warts and all. This reflects a broader truth about Star Trek. The franchise has always evolved through reinvention. The original series was swashbuckling space adventure. The Next Generation was philosophical. Deep Space Nine was morally gray and serialized. Voyager was survivalist and hopeful. Discovery is emotive and modern. Strange New Worlds embraces episodic nostalgia. And yes, the Kelvin films were big, brash, and made for a multiplex. Every era leaves its mark. Every era deserves a seat at the table, even the one covered in lens flares. Lower Decks, Star Trek's funhouse mirror. Lower Decks has become the conscience of Star Trek. It takes what fans love and love to mock and distills it into something new. Whether it's poking fun at the overly convenient time travel plots of Voyager, the melodrama of Discovery, or the stoicism of Picard, the show operates like a funhouse mirror reflecting every era of the franchise. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but it takes Trek seriously. So when it parodies the Abramsverse, it's part of that same loving tradition. It's not about rejecting the past, but processing it through humor and perspective. It's Trek therapy, with jokes. Canon isn't sacred, it's shared. The Kelvin timeline has long existed in a strange space. Technically canon, but separated by a different timeline, its events don't affect the Prime universe directly. It gives shows like Lower Decks freedom to reference it while keeping it at arm's length. By acknowledging it through parody, Lower Decks sends a subtle message. All Trek matters, but not all Trek needs to be treated with reverence. Some fans may bristle at the joke, taking it as a slight against films they enjoyed. But Star Trek has always thrived on diversity, not just in species and starships, but in storytelling. The franchise has room for the meditative slow burn of Picard and the hyper-paced adrenaline of Into Darkness. The fact that the two can coexist, even mock each other, is proof of Trek's strength, not its fracture. The future of Meta Trek, this moment in Lower Decks is more than just a joke. It's a reminder of how self-aware Star Trek has become. In an age of media multiverses, fan service, and franchise fatigue, Trek's ability to laugh at itself might be its most enduring power. By calling out J.J. Abrams' reboot with a hilarious dig, Star Trek does what it's always done best: provoke thought, invite discussion, and bring fans together, this time with a smirk and a wink. And perhaps most importantly, it shows that Star Trek has learned a vital lesson from its own history. Just because it